Hi everybody, welcome to episode 18-ish of the Coffee, Yarn, and Dinosaurs podcast. My name is Ruth. I am the designer behind the Everyday Yarnworks knitting and crochet patterns and the dyer behind Fearless Feet Fiber Company. You can find me on the internet, on Facebook, on Ravelry, all under Ruth Brash or Everyday Yarnworks. I will link everything below. And you can find me on Instagram as Everyday Yarnworks or Fearless Feet Fiber Co. if you're looking for yarn. And welcome. I want to take a little bit of time to chat today about some knitting projects, some yarn that I've acquired, not from Rhinebeck. I didn't go to Rhinebeck this year. And about some trends that we've been seeing in knitwear design. So first of all, if you are new, thank you so much for joining me. This is the first episode of a slightly revamped version of the podcast. If you look at the old ones, you'll see mostly just projects, yarn, and this is the beginning of me attempting to switch things up a little bit, to incorporate trends, to incorporate interviews, to introduce you guys to my corner of the knitting world and maybe some things that you haven't seen before. So, grab your drink. I'm drinking just plain coffee with some almond joy creamer in it. So first I want to start off with a new section that I am calling Trend Alert, which is where I want to discuss some things that I see in the fiber arts community that are becoming popular. Maybe you've seen them, maybe you haven't. Thought I'd highlight them a little bit. The first thing I've noticed is a trend towards solid colored yarns. A lot of the knitting community for at least the past couple of years has been very inundated and focused on speckled yarns, indie dyed yarns, bright colors. This isn't a fantastic example because this is not an indie yarn, but this is a speckled yarn. This one is a variegated yarn. You can see this is one of my designs. This is one of my designs. This is the yarn doodle shawl. And these types of yarns, the variegated and speckled yarns, have been very popular for the past couple of years. Even during the fall, no matter what the season, it seems that for the past couple of years, it's just been the colors that have changed, not so much the style of yarn dyeing. And then all of a sudden this year, there's been a huge shift towards solid colored or tonal yarns, indie dyed or not, the deep saturated jewel tones, the tweed yarns, the more earthy, people call them rustic yarns, non-superwash, breeds that are not merino. There seems to be a trend towards more traditional fibers, working away from the merino where everyone has been and going towards traditional fibers. I would love to hear what you guys are working with right now. I have gotten the opportunity to try out a couple of these different breed yarns, and I'll be telling you a little bit about that further on in the podcast. But I'd love to know what you guys are working on. If you've seen that trend, have you seen the transition from speckled yarns to solids, to tweeds, to non-superwash, and where you stand on that? Is it something that, are the speckles something you've never been into? Are they something that you have been into and you're sad to see them go, or you're really happy to see them go? Let me know, drop me a comment. I'm curious. I'm curious to see if I'm the only one noticing this trend or if others are seeing it as well. So the second trend is photography seems to be darkening. If you look at the project pages or the pattern pages from designers on Ravelry, for a long time, everything would have a bright white background and it would be, you know, the designer standing against a white background. And now lately there's these darker photographs, which is a little bit strange to me, but I find it very interesting that there seems to be a bit of a shift from let's have everything pristine and white and clean to more of a natural, earthy aesthetic where you don't necessarily have to have the whitewashed background. So those are the trends I'm seeing. The next section I want to talk about WIPs, the projects that I'm working on. So I actually have been working on a new design over the past couple days, and this is a design that has been in my head. It's been a concept for a while, but it hasn't actually become reality purely because I'm working on so many designs and so many concepts all the time. But let me show it to you. This is the Ode to Autumn hat. For those of you guys who are familiar with my designs, you know that I have a hat that is similar in shape in that it has a one panel motif with texture all the way around it. That is my Ode to Summer hat. And so this pattern is pretty simple. It's just some nice texture all the way around, and then this beautiful cable and lace pattern that goes up the hat. And I'm going to try this on, but this is one size too small for me, which you'll sort of see in a minute. So it mostly fits me. Where's my cable panel? There it is. So it mostly fits me, but I have to sort of pull it down a little bit to get it to fit how I would want it to. So there's that. Hopefully you guys can see the hat. So this is a new design, as I said, that I've been working on over the past couple of days. It is going to be sized from about 6 months old all the way up to an adult large. And the way that I do the sizing for this particular pattern, this is not how I normally do it, but a way that I do the sizing is by adjusting my gauge, by adjusting the needle size that I use and the thickness of yarn that I use. So for example, this is my adult medium hat, and I used stone wool Cormo, which is one of those non-merino rustic yarns that I was talking about a minute ago. And it is a non-superwash yarn, a 2-ply, and it's a worsted weight. It's 200 yards per 100 gram skein. And as you look at it, it looks, let's see, I'll put this in front of my face. It looks like a hand spun yarn. It doesn't look like your typical mill processed yarn. And if you go on the website, I believe it's Twig and Horn is the website that sells this yarn exclusively. It's not other places. If you go on the Twig and Horn website, they talk about how this yarn was created on purpose to mimic a hand spun yarn because the stone wool company originally was a hand spun yarn company. So this is technically a machine processed yarn, spun, plied, all of that, but it's intentionally created to be like a hand spun yarn, which is really nice. And I could feel that when I was knitting with it. It did feel, it has this nice squish to it that you don't always get in the compact, tightly spun yarns. My only complaint about this yarn is that it had a pretty decent amount of vegetable matter in it, which means that it had pieces of hay or grass, which is normal in a hand spun yarn. It is normal if you get a fleece that you have to pick out that vegetable matter when you spin it, but it is not something that I would expect in a commercial yarn. Maybe taking the authenticity a little too far there. Just because you're trying to make it seem like hand spun doesn't mean you have to have all the vegetable matter in it. But overall, I really enjoyed it. And I was surprised because Stone Wool promotes a hat pattern with this yarn on their website that requires 2 skeins of yarn, which at $25 a skein, a $50 hat is not cheap. But I was really surprised. I made this hat the adult medium sized with almost exactly half a skein of yarn with 52 grams. So this is 48 grams of yarn left over, which means that if I went down a needle size, I could make an adult small with the second half of yarn. So being able to get 2 hats out of fairly expensive skein of yarn is a really big deal for me, and I was pleasantly surprised. And it's good that I can go down a needle size and get another hat out of this because my photographer saw a picture of my son wearing this hat online and requested one immediately. And I don't do custom work. I don't sell finished objects anymore, but my photographer has done really good work for me in the past, and she is a friend, so that's what happens. When knitters love you, you get handmade things. So this is my medium size. The next size down is this pretty yellow. I'll hold them up together so you can see the sizing difference. Like this, see? So you can see they're sort of similar, maybe about ½ an inch shorter on this one. And then width-wise, maybe about 2.5 inches in circumference. So this is my child size. This is knit with a DK weight yarn. In fact, I have another skein of it. It is Knit Picks Swish DK in their honey colorway. And I really, really enjoy this yarn at this particular gauge. It seems, I feel that a lot of people knit DK weight yarn at too tight of a gauge because the yarn seems so small. It seems so much thinner than a worsted weight yarn. But I prefer to use the same needle size as I would for a worsted weight yarn because, I don't know, I feel that it works better. It's a nice loose hat. Now, the interesting thing about sizing is that this hat fits both my older son and my younger son. And my older son has a 21-inch head, which is an adult medium-sized head. So this hat fits my older son, and this hat fits my older son as well because it's a very stretchy fabric. Because the interior of the motif has lace in it, it helps the hat not be compressed by the cables. So this is the second size, and I do not have the third size with me. The reason I do not have the third size with me is because my baby daughter already wears it, and I am not 100% sure where it is right now. But the third size was made with this beautiful bright green. This is Ba Sonoma yarn, which is, Ba is the company and Sonoma is their DK weight base. And you can see, even if you look at these two yarns, there is quite a difference in how they look. The Ba yarn is a very tightly spun, tightly plied yarn. It's a 2-ply. And the Knit Picks is a looser spin, a looser ply. So a hat made from this is going to be much softer and floppier and probably a little bit bigger than a hat made from this. So that's the Ode to Autumn hat. You will see, it's probably by the time I get this video up, it'll be up for testing in my Ravelry group. If you are someone who enjoys doing pattern testing, feel free to jump over to my Ravelry group. I would love to see you. There will be a link in the description box below for you to get to my Ravelry group, which is where I primarily run tests, make announcements, business announcements. If you are looking for community, if you want to interact with other makers, other knitters, crocheters, whatever, there is an Everyday Yarnworks Facebook group. Again, link below. Everything that I'm mentioning, there will be a link in the description box, so you don't have to worry about rewinding and fast forwarding this video. Just go down to the link right below this video and you can click on and navigate to wherever you want to go. So yeah, Facebook group, that's the Ode to Autumn hat. Oh, and because I know I said this was a whip section, I am actually working on the largest size hat right now. And this is Vanna's Choice in the Marble Heather colorway. So it's a beautiful light gray with some little tweedy neps in it. And so again, this is going to be the adult large size, which will fit my head, interestingly enough. I have a 23.5-inch head, which means I have to wear men's size hats if I buy them commercially, which is part of the reason why I enjoy making my own hats, because I can make a design or a color that is not masculine and make it for myself in the right size. Or I can make headbands or ear warmers, because the ones you buy in a store, I get a headache within 5 minutes because my head is just too big to fit them. So working on the largest size, and then I may even do a newborn size, a newborn to 3-month size for this hat. We'll see. We'll see if it works out. I'll try it out. I'll try my swatching and my gauge and we'll see if it works out. So that's it for that project bag. Quick update on the arrow shawl that I was working on last week. Here it is. Beautiful. It was just not working out. The way I did it was not working out. It is a concept that is going to happen. However, it will happen in a different form. So, gorgeous shawl, right? Yep, frogged. That happens. Another project that I am working on, I actually started after frogging this guy and putting aside the sweater that I was working on in the last episode. And I was feeling very discouraged about my design progress at that point in time, because having to frog one design, having another one, the math for the sleeves for the sweater isn't quite working out the way that I want it to. And I was wanting to work on something that was not a design. I wanted to be able to just knit and be happy. Why am I always in the middle of a row? This always happens. I'm sure you guys pick things up in the middle of a row too. But I wanted to work on something that would just be enjoyable, that would just be fun, that I didn't necessarily have to write down for a design. So I cast on just a fun shawl shape. This is just, I don't even know what shape you would call this. It's when it's half of this size, it's just called an asymmetrical shawl. I don't know if you would call it maybe a double asymmetrical shawl, or, yeah, I don't know. So it's just garter stitch and lace placed wherever I want it to. And the yarn is really fun. The yarn is, let me find the label. The yarn is Red Heart, It's a Wrap Rainbow. And the colorway is Couture. So Red Heart, It's a Wrap. And they list this as a #1 yarn, which should be a fingering or lace weight yarn. But if you go on Ravelry, it's listed as a sport weight yarn. Not 100% sure what that's all about. But here it is. It's one of those yarns that comes in a cake. And you can see that the gradient changes. It's not applied yarn. It's a yarn where the strands just sit next to each other. Instead of being applied yarn, they would be twisted together like this. But this is an unplied yarn. The strands just sit next to each other. So it's going to transition to this beautiful teal and then into a little bit more gray and black. And I'm excited for that. This is something that I'm picking up just for fun. I'm picking up when I want to knit on it. I don't know if it will turn into a pattern. I've had a couple of people ask me, hey, can you give us the pattern for that? Which I could. I know what I'm doing. I'm apparently a little too type A to just do whatever I want to with a shawl. I do have to have a concept in my head, but I'm knitting it without currently writing it down. So I don't know. Let me know if you're interested. Maybe you need a little bit of shawl therapy too, if you guys need just something nice and easy and simple. Little asymmetry there. Yeah, let me know. Comment, tell me if you're interested in the pattern. I make no guarantees that I will write it up even if you do comment and tell me that you're interested, but at least I will know that there is interest, which is always a good thing. So there's that. Take a drink of coffee. And the last thing that I'm working on is I have, as just about every knitter does, friends who are having a baby soon. And I have been on the lookout trying to figure out what the perfect blanket pattern would be, or what I wanted to make for this baby. And I tried a couple of different yarns, I tried a couple of different patterns, and nothing really worked out for me. And I got, this is Bernat velvet yarn. And you can see it's it's very loosely wound. It's almost falling off the skein here. I am not 100% sure if this is what you would call a chenille yarn, because back in the day chenille was not cool, and so I avoided it like the plague. It is 100% polyester yarn, so it is synthetic, but it is very, 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 very soft. And the reason I chose this yarn is I wanted a thick-ish yarn. Sorry, I'm winding it all up because it comes off the ball every time I move it, because it's just very loosely wound. The reason I chose this yarn is because when I was in the store, I didn't want to use the Bernat blanket yarn, because even though it's intended for blankets, I found it a little too thick and a little not quite soft enough. And this yarn is the one that I kept coming back to when I was in the store. I kept doing this. I kept putting my face on it because it just feels so nice and soft. You just want to pet it. So I'm doing a very simple increasing blanket. And you can see it really does look like velvet when I hold it up in front of the camera, which is kind of fun. So I just started here, like you're doing a dishcloth, and I'm just going to increase until I get the width that I want, and then start decreasing back down so I can get a square, kind of like if you were working a hap shawl or a washcloth. And obviously I will have to put it on bigger needles at some point in time because this is only about 10 inches wide. And let's see, then I have one ball of a light pink color, and I'm going to pick up stitches around the edge of this and knit on some type of border. I'm not sure whether it'll be a sideways border or just maybe some pretty garter stitch around the edge. And you might be wondering, how in the world, in all of this clumpiness, how in the world can you see to pick up a border on that? And my wonderful, wonderful little tip or sneak for you guys is that you don't have to be able to see, because I am doing yarn over increases. So that means that I have a hole at the edge of every row that is just the right size for me to insert my needle and pick up stitches when I want to work the border. An alternate way that you could do this, which I'm also doing, is you could slip the first stitch of every row, but I find it's easier for me to see where I want to pick up the stitch if I actually just leave the yarn over hole there. So then I have all these nice little gaps right along the edge of a yarn that's difficult to see. So if you're knitting a baby blanket out of one of those yarns that is very difficult, leave yourself a yarn over edge and you'll be able to pick up your stitches. This is my knitting in the dark project. If we're watching a TV show or a movie at night, I, as you can see, have attached my little Sugar Plum Circus deer to this side so I can feel which side is the right side and which side is the wrong side, and just know whether I need to knit or purl on the current side that I'm on. And right now it's plain stockinette, so it's nothing that I actually need to see. I just need to know that I'm increasing, and there's my little stitch marker, so that means I'm on the right side, which is great. That is everything that I'm working on for right now, which is quite a lot. It's definitely very much plenty. So, speaking of Sugar Plum Circus is she's a new dyer, but she's not new to the fiber arts world. Sugar Plum Circus is previously known as Truffles Shuffle, and she makes these cute little stitch markers. And you might have seen her do unicorns and things like that. They're very, very cute. I've mentioned her before all the time. But now she has started dyeing yarn. And I saw the pictures online and I thought, wow, those are some very vivid colors, and I wonder if they are actually that vivid in real life. I know that some dyers edit their photos, because you're trying to get the color to be accurate on the screen. But sometimes in an attempt to get the color to be accurate on the screen, the photos come out with the color looking more vivid than it actually is. So I decided to buy some of her yarn because I have ideas for it, obviously design ideas, but also I wanted to see if it was actually true to her photos. And I was pleasantly surprised, it is. So this little skein here This is called Zelina. And this is it's called her Merino 4-ply base. It's 100% superwash merino, 438 yards. So it's a pretty medium standard sock yarn, but it's this beautiful, bright, vivid green with some little bit of black speckling. And she does what are called funhouse skeins, which essentially means that, you know how dyers do one-of-a-kind skeins, whether they don't want to write down the recipe or whether it didn't quite go exactly as planned. Jensen calls them funhouse skeins. So this is one really beautiful, beautiful, beautiful skein. I believe she has attempted to recreate this at this point because somehow I managed to snag this right at the beginning of her shop update, and a lot of people were disappointed. Oops. So she attempted to recreate it, and I believe she now carries this on Aran weight and is doing maybe pre-orders for Aran weight and sock weight and things like that. And the third thing I got from her was this little pack of minis. She calls them a funhouse trio. So it's 3 colors. For whatever reason, they're not her standard colorways. And she bundles them up for you in colors that will work nicely together in little, what are they, 20-gram skeins? 20-gram skeins. So I have yet to figure out what I'm going to do with these because I don't use minis very often, but I have a feeling it may involve some color work. And speaking of color work, color work is another one of those trends that seems to be increasing, which is interesting to me because I've noticed a lot of knitters used to be very scared to try stranded color work or to try steeking or complicated looking techniques. And it seems that there has been a trend towards more difficult techniques and introducing them to the public. And I find that very interesting. I see a lot of designers that are maybe more well recognized. Caitlin Hunter, Andrea Mowry. I'm trying to think who else is doing this lately, but they've been doing patterns with a complicated technique in them and then doing either a knit along or doing an online event to help knitters not be afraid of this technique. So I decided to grab a couple of colorwork stitch dictionaries and see if I could play around with them. And the first one I got, I'm sure you've seen. It is the Alternate Stitch Dictionary by Andrea Rangel. And I'd heard a lot of people tell me that there were very cool motifs in it and it was very unique. She gives, you know, it's like this. It's like your standard stitch dictionary. And then afterwards she gives a couple of patterns and a couple of tips for integrating color work into a design or integrating color work into a pattern that you already have that's already established if you just want to add it on. How to shape shoulders in that particular pattern. And this is very interesting too. She lists in the back swatches and row counts. So if you're just quickly trying to reference, pattern repeats or how wide or how many stitches, whatever, she has them all listed in the back, which is very handy. And the second book that I found, which I really enjoy, is Alice Starmore's Charts for Color Knitting. And this was not a new book, but it is the republished edition. It was republished in 2011, originally published in 1992. And one of the things that I enjoy about this, I was expecting it just to be a stitch dictionary, but Alice actually takes the time to write her thoughts on color, sort of like a little bit of an essay, a little bit of essay on color work, adding it into how to appropriately center it on a sweater or things of that nature. But I just wanted to read to you guys a quick little paragraph from, it says, she said, a word on color. Let's see. She says, there is no formula I can give which will turn anyone into a successful colorist. If you use a formula, then your results will be formulaic and will lack that magic sparkle that is the hallmark of a great design. The art has to come from your own mind, and the eye must be your own, and it is here that you can make a start. I believe that everyone has the capacity to create work that will please them if they give themselves a chance. It does involve time and effort, and success may not come in an instant. It is vital to be excited about your project and to realize that the swatch you regard as a failure is actually a worthwhile experiment which you can study and learn from. This is an essential part of the creative process. My instinct is simply and briefly to say, marvel with passion at the endless beauty in the world. Surround yourselves with beautiful yarns and colors and plunge in. Essentially, this is how I work myself. And I thought that was very interesting because here is Alice Starmore, who, if you have not heard of her somehow, please look her up. Her work is very well known and it's excellent. But here is Alice Starmore saying, here's a book of colorwork charts, but I can only tell you how to use them so far, because you can't do what everyone else is doing. You can't create a design because somebody else has made a design. You can't use a technique because somebody else has. That you have to look at whatever project you are working on, or you have to look at these charts and decide what you think is a beautiful way to use them. So there's pages and pages of just these huge motifs, and she shares a couple of ways that she's used them, but she says specifically that she put them all in black and white because color is subjective and everyone is going to find a different color combination beautiful. And I thought that that was very interesting to give technique, but not necessarily direction on how to use those techniques. And I really like that because I feel that this book is more focused on maybe educating and promoting design or promoting exploration within knitting, as opposed to giving such specific directions for a pattern. And I really like that because I think that many knitters get so focused on having to follow a pattern directly that they forget that there's room to improvise. And if you understand technically how the pattern works, or you understand technically how a hat is shaped, you understand how mittens are shaped, whatever project you're working on, it is okay to improvise as long as you know what you're doing. And if you don't know what you're doing, then you'll try it and you will learn what you're doing by failure. And I find that very interesting. So I don't know if you're going to see colorwork patterns from me. Again, let me know if you're interested. I don't know if you will. It's something that I'm interested in pursuing because I would love to try to combine some colors and make things work. But I don't know. It may happen, it may not. But this is a great book, even just for getting inside the mind of a designer who is very well known for colorwork and cables and intricate design. To hear her say that she starts from being impressed or amazed by what she sees around her, just like the rest of us are, and then she has just learned and honed her skills to translate that into a beautiful design. Highly recommended. I got this from Knit Picks. It's around, they carry it. It was a book sale. I actually got this and the other Stitch Dictionary from Knit Picks. Very interesting to look at, very interesting to read. Although I should note that there are some designs, like this big seashell one in the back, that are her own original colorwork charts, and there is a note that you may not use those to publish a design. You can use the traditional charts from all around the world, but you may not use her particular concepts, I guess. Which makes sense, that's a lot of work to put those concepts. But alternately, the Alternate Stitch Dictionary encourages designers to take these and put them on their own designs. So you may recognize plenty of the motifs that are in here if you buy this book. Like the little sheep one that's on the front, that's all over the place. The leaves, seen that all over the place. But that's good. It's good that designers are using good resources. Let's see. The last bit of something I wanted to talk about is a book that I'm reading. I am trying to read more either physical books or read books more than watching TV shows, because I used to read a lot and I have found that I don't anymore. And one of the things I enjoy is young adult literature, because I feel that sometimes contemporary novelists try too hard, but young adult literature often has an aspect of magic or fantasy that I just find interesting. So, with a comic book as a bookmarker, not my comic book, I am reading Dragon Rider by Cornelia Funk, who, if you are familiar with the Inkheart series, I may have spoken about it before. She is the author of the Inkheart series, and I found it at the library. And I'm enjoying it so far, even though I'm only about 30 pages in. I'll let you know how it works out. Quick little life update before I insert the interview with Christine Guest. We did sell the bus, which means that we are officially no longer bus people. And yep, I think that's about it. We sold the bus. We're not bus people anymore.